Let's talk a little bit about your research. Why did you even start researching the subject?
Yeah, so I've been studying something called resilience, which is basically doing well in the face of adversities among kids and adolescents. That's what my dissertation was on, and that's always been sort of the question that has most preoccupied me. After a while, maybe 5-10 years into my career, it became pretty clear, not just from my work, but from the field's work, that if you want kids to be resilient, they need to have a good relationship with their primary caregiver, usually moms, which means in turn the primary caregiver has to be doing at least reasonably well, right? So from that point on, and this has now become an established fact in our business, the resilience business, that the single most important thing if you want a child to do well is to ensure the well-being of the mother, the primary caregiver. Make sense? That's the person with whom the child spends the most time. So it makes sense that that would be the most influential relationship.
How do you define resilience?
Resilience is doing well in spite of encountering significant adversities. Now those could be a one-time, not a one-time thing, a single variable, so to speak, like being a child of a depressed mom or an alcoholic dad. It could also mean facing everyday stressors along, continuously, like being exposed to violence in the neighborhood on an ongoing basis, or these days, college pressures. How do kids withstand this enormous amount of stress around getting into some of the better colleges, which seems to be an ambition that so many young people have these days.
And then moms, how about resilience as it pertains to moms?
Yeah, so what I say is that just by its very definition, being a mom is a high-risk life circumstance. You say why is because we are first responders to our kids' distress. So anytime you find a child in a situation where the child is in danger, psychologically or physically, moms are de facto. They experience that pain with the child sometimes many times over. Mothers feel their children's pain maybe 10 times more than the kids feel it themselves. So just by its very definition, being a mom, being empathic to your own child, the contagion of stress is a huge amount, is a huge load. Now multiply that by number of children and multiply that by number of years, and no break in between. You can't say, oh, I think for 6 months I'll just stop being a mom, thank you very much.
There's moderate support for kids, for moms when the kids are little, but then the middle school years, what's showing up?
This was such an interesting set of issues to explore. In developmental psychology, we look at motherhood or parenthood in stages. And by far, most of the work is on transition to new motherhood, first-time parents. And a colleague of mine, Lucia, and I, we published a paper a couple of years ago where we looked at moms at different life stages of their kids, moms of babies, preschoolers, elementary, middle, high school, and grown kids. And it was uniformly across the outcome variables we looked at, there was one stage where everything peaked, the bad things, the distress, and that was middle school. That was middle school. It was not high school. I would say middle school is the new high school. But back to your question, we are prepared so much with what to expect when expecting, and family rallies around and friends rally around with casseroles and what have you, and advice, and nobody prepares us for this. And this is arguably the most psychologically challenging for us moms, for many reasons. Maybe the single most important is the child is pulling away from you. This child who looked at you adoringly, I remember both of them saying, no, I'm sitting next to mom, no, I'm sitting next to mom. Suddenly this child morphs into this weird person who looks at you with distance and sometimes even dislike and scorn. That's awfully hard, and no one really prepares you for the kind of hurt you feel when your child pulls away like that, which is developmentally normative for them. It's just that we don't know, no one prepares us for it. So that's one. Then there are so many things a child is going through that become so worrisome for us. Think hormones and mood swings, and child is very unpredictable. Think experimentation with drugs and alcohol. This is when they're supposed to be, checking out different things, experimenting, but these are things that are significant and could have an impact on the child's life long term. So there's a whole new set of challenges. What to do about sleepovers, what you do if you detect any kind of substance use. Then there's this popularity thing. This is the time when they say, gotta be popular, and they feel so hurt and so shaken to their toes if they're left out, and you watch your child's pain. Then it is the transition from elementary to middle school, where you have the kids have their one teacher and the one classroom. It's safe, secure, to this enormous building usually, where they change classrooms and change teachers. It can be quite bewildering. It's all for the kids and therefore for us. And then there's a thing about the activities. They have kids now, what grade, what track are you? And are you on the honors track or the regular track? You're going to be a starter on the X team or the Y team. You're doing debate, you're doing trumpet. All of these things start really taking on a life of their own in middle school, where the schools are invested in saying, yep, we got a talented kid here, got to make the most of it. So for all of these reasons, the toll it takes on mothers is just enormous. And I'm glad that we're finally beginning to talk about that.
What can we do for these moms?
In resilience research, we know one thing. Resilience rests fundamentally on relationships. Just like kids need to feel like they have someone who's watching out for them, who loves them unconditionally, guess what? So do we. The mothers need exactly the same thing. So what we need is our band of sisterhood, of sisters, our go-to people whom we trust and feel embraced and loved and held by, so that we can get that same kind of care and tending that we give to our children. So I wrote this paper again with my colleague Lucia. It's called Who Mothers Mommy? We need to have that mothering in place. And don't wait until middle school, because by then you are going to be swamped with the activities and the demands of the children. I'd say right from the get-go, think about this not as a luxury, but as an imperative. You must have this if you're going to be able to do a half-decent job at being a mom to kids these days.
Not necessarily a support group, but just a network of friends. Is that what you're saying?
I would even go one step further. There's a phrase we use in these groups that we run for moms. It's, I feel seen and loved for the person I am at my core, which goes a few steps beyond being a friend. It really is someone who gets you and who loves you despite or because of your little flaws, idiosyncrasies and so on. So it goes beyond having a support group or having friends. It really is saying, imagine what your kids need from you. That is what you need from other people. And that needs to be in place, and that needs to be respected, prioritized, and sustained. That is what makes us thrive.
Can't dad do that?
There is a research showing that dads do a lot, but what fathers do for mothers or what men do for women is not the same as what women do for men. Right? So if I ask this question, which I often do, who mothers mommy, who mothers you? Everybody has an answer. Could be nobody, my sister, my mom. If I ask you who fathers you, even the question doesn't make sense. You see? So there is something about, and of course there's studies on the biological aspects of caregiving and tending, or even how fathers and mothers relate to their kids differently. Fathers engage more in play and that sort of thing than mothers do. So dads and husbands can do an enormous amount, but they don't mother you. And this is not fair. Why should it be that everybody gets mothered except mothers themselves? And sure enough, if you're fortunate enough to have a mom to whom you feel close and you are in touch with regularly, wonderful. But there are way too many moms with the breakup of the nuclear family and traveling across continents where women don't have that. And we need to know that we deserve this and we must have it.
There are cases more and more where the dad is the primary caregiver. So would he slide right into that mom role? Same-sex couples, single dads?
Yes, I think single dads, same-sex couples would slide into that role, and they would need the same kind of support. It's almost like, think of an equation, that which you put out, you must have coming in. There's got to be a balance there. It doesn't make sense to say, oh, keep loving and keep the balance limit setting and keep a sensible eye and take my temper tantrums with a grain of salt and be just sweet and affable and loving. How can you do all that if you're not getting it?
How did you do your study?
Around 10 years ago, I got preoccupied with this question of what does it feel like to be a mother? In developmental science, child development, we have hundreds of studies saying what moms do for their children, what they don't, what they should, what they shouldn't. But nobody had asked, what does it feel like to be a mother? So I set about exploring that and started with an online, basically, questionnaire that was completed, ended up being completed by almost 2,500 to 3,000 moms all over the country, where we asked about their hopes and aspirations, their fears, their disappointments, their mental health, well-being. And that was the start of this whole journey about exploring motherhood, which I find quite beautiful.
When did you finish a study and start analyzing and putting together numbers?
I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago, we sort of wound it down and started looking at different questions. So one of them was developmental stages and how the children's developmental stage. One was on big risk and protective factors, which is different aspects of their relationships. Which of these are the most important for mom's well-being? And I'll give you the short answer is there's a big four, and this is over and above the quality of your marriages. So these big four are: one is feeling real, authentic in your relationships. Second is feeling that you have comfort ready when you need it. Third is satisfaction with your friendships. And God help me, I can't remember the fourth one right now. But the important thing was that these four things were significant over and above the quality of marriages. So when we're looking at mother's well-being, that was one of the first papers after the developmental stages paper, where basically the quality of your friendships outside of your marriage are critical for your well-being, for multiple aspects of your well-being. So that was one. We looked at mothers working and not working outside the home. That was a third paper. So there are multiple different chunks that we've been publishing on as time goes by.
Anything else on the moms and middle schoolers issue that I haven't asked that you think we should get in the story?
There is one more thing about the moms. All this stuff about what's happening as a mom, and that's perplexing and confusing and sometimes hurtful, unfortunately is happening at the same time that you're aging. You're not quite as young and energetic and even attractive as perhaps you were, and your child is becoming all of those things. So a lot of these things happen together. It's sort of the perfect storm in some ways that moms have to deal with all of these changes simultaneously. And then there's menopause approaching, and there are data even showing that this tween to adolescent stage is challenging for women's marriages as well.